You should have everything you need in your kit. One thing I will say is your towel will come folded, so you may want to iron it or somehow get it flat. It's not a super necessary point, but because we're using the spray paint, anywhere that there's a crease, it might get, you know, a little variation of the spray paint. So once you've done that, you're going to find your center, where you want your skull to actually be. So for me, I'm planning to fold my towel into thirds, and so the skull is actually going to be dead center on the towel on the lower side, so when it folds over, you see it right there. But if you want it down in the corner, if you want to fold yours into fourths, however you want to do it, just find where you want your skull. And I used a little pin to pin that center point, but you know, you can use paper clip, you can just kind of hold it with your fingers, however you want to do it to get it centered. But that pin's going to remind me where my skull is going to be centered. I'm going about 4 inches up from the bottom. Remember, if you are going to fold it over your oven, something like that, then you don't want it to be too high up or right dead center, because then it won't show when it's hanging over something. In your kit, you'll have this black spray paint. It's safe for indoors. Whoops, I messed up there a little bit. It's safe for indoors, non-toxic. It does spritz a little bit, so maybe wear an apron, get stuff off of your surface. And on this flat surface, you're going to spray above your stencil, spraying down. If you get too much on the side, you might get some wind under your stencil and it'll move. So once you've sprayed, you can wait a little bit if you want, but the paint that's on the stencil isn't really going to dry anytime soon. It's always going to stay wet. So what you can do is, with a clean finger and the very, very tip of your fingernail, you can also get a toothpick or something like that. Just catch an edge under your stencil and lift it up. When you do that, and notice I did it kind of quickly, you have wet paint on that stencil and you don't want it to drip onto your surface, and it will drip. They're little, you know, droplets of paint. So just go ahead and be quick about that and try and keep it flat, and you can go rinse it and reuse it for some other project. Now, the very first thing we're going to do is the black teeth on your skull. I don't usually recommend doing black first, but the thing is, we're going to need to know how high, you know, where the teeth placement is going to be in order to do the rest of our flowers. So first things first, teeth. They're so cute. I'm starting in the center, and I'm working my way out to one side, and then I'll come back and do the other side and try and mirror it. You can do the whole top first, you can do the whole bottom, you can jump tooth to tooth, however you want to do it. But, you know, it's just like a real skull, and your front teeth are bigger, and then the side teeth get smaller and further away, so they don't look as big. So try and do that, but you can make them all the same size too. You're just connecting the lines that are existing with your stencil. Oh, I should have mentioned, I'm using the small brush. You have a couple brushes. I'm using the small one for this because I want some smaller lines. I'm also not pushing too deep onto the towel. I'm keeping a light pressure, and you can even see it's like a very gentle, delicate line. And then I go back over it. And I don't want too much water on my paintbrush. You'll see here in a second, I think it's this one, I did have a little too much water. And so when I paint on it, it actually splashes up a little bit and gets a little spread out there. But I mean, it's fine. It's always there's never going to be perfect paint. But just try not to have too much water, use mostly paint, and replenish your water and paint as needed. One little tip is try not, even when you're dipping your paintbrush in the water, try not to get droplets of water on that metal part of the top end, you know, the end closest to the bristles of your paintbrush, because it'll roll down when you're not expecting it, and then it'll just make a big blob. So try and avoid that. Water droplets are not good. You can pat your paintbrush dry. The bristles can be a little bit moist, but the brush itself shouldn't have water droplets on it. All right, and there we have the teeth. So I'm going to close my black paint up. You'll see there's not very much paint in these little ramekins, but frankly, it's enough to get the job done. You really don't need that much paint for this project. So I let the black dry just a little bit, and then I'm going to move into doing blue. That's going to be mostly flowers and dots. It's decorative at this point. We're just going nuts with it. I'm doing a little floral type of petals around the eye sockets. So what I'm doing for this one is I've taken the smaller brush and I get a little bit of paint on there, and then I just kind of make, you know, one stroke a little bit angled and then another stroke a little bit angled, and then I fill in the center. It's like little V's, little triangles that I'm making, and they end up looking a little bit like little petals. So I'm just doing that around the eye socket. Doesn't have to be perfect. You can come back later and tidy it up. But this just gets us a little bit of a floral fun around the eye sockets. Keep in mind while you're doing this that the black spray paint, while you have let it sit and dry for a little bit, it's not fully dry. So try not to touch your hand to the black spray paint portion, because if you do, then your hand will have black paint on it, and then once you move your hand around a little bit, you'll get the black paint everywhere. So try and, that's why my hand looks a little delicate right there. I'm trying to lift my hand up and not actually rest it on the painting there, because you'll spread paint real easy doing that. That's, you know, never a fun thing. Okay, next I'm just going to go fill in anywhere that I think needs a little bit more paint, tidy up some jagged edges, and just overall make this look a little tidier. But should be pretty straightforward on that part. So now I'm just going to continue doing blue. So now I'm going to do kind of a flower, a big flower on the forehead with kind of some angled petals. And keep in mind, you'll see in the end, but there's going to be a little bit of a black dot eyebrow, so you don't want the flower coming down too far. I mean, it's not the worst thing. You can rearrange your design however you need to, but we are going to have some black dots kind of coming down in the center of that forehead, between the eyes, the eyebrow, where the eyebrows would be. So keep your flower a little bit more straight on the forehead, or should I say 5 head on this skull. And for this one, I'm using the big brush. Next, I'm going to do some fun little beauty marks, some dots around the outside of the mouth here. I'm doing a big dot right at the corner of the lips, and then 2 smaller dots up and down from that. For the dots, you'll just use the very tip, get a decent amount of paint on there. Use the very tip of your paintbrush and just swirl it around a little bit to get a dot. It can be a little tricky. I mean, the bigger, sometimes it's tricky and you end up with a really large dot, which is totally fine, but the trick is to not try and get the paintbrush flat on its side, but to use the tip of it lightly with a decent amount of paint. Now, once I finish the blue on the actual skull, I'm going to do some fun flowers around the outside. You know, you can make your decoration here however you want to. I'm just starting with a big round petal flower at the top, and then I'll do some on the sides and fill those out. And I just make it as big as I need to. Same thing here, I'm using the bigger brush for this. Now I'm doing a flower that's similar to the one on the forehead. I'm doing fewer petals than that one, but it's a similar layout and a little bit smaller off to the side. Then I'm just going back and filling out some petals, making sure it's the size that I want. I'll be coming in with some pink details and making some pink flowers. So right now I'm just kind of figuring out what I want that layout to be. How many blue to pink flowers, and that kind of thing. So moving on, I'm now moving to pink. I let the blue dry a little bit, and then I'm coming back and I'm doing pink. I'm using the big brush for this. I didn't do a great job of it, but if you want to clean out your water cup and get fresh water, you can get rid of some blue. That might be a good idea. My pink ended up a little blue. I will say, so right now I'm painting pink on top of that black spray paint. And when I do that, my black spray paint is, I mean, it's not completely dry, but I've let it dry a little bit at this point, but it's still soaking in some of the pink, so that even though when I paint it on, it looks like a bright pink, once it soaks into the black, it ends up looking like just a darker pink color. So that's why I'm kind of going back over it several times to build up that color so it looks a little bit more pink. It's never going to look as bright as it will if I'm painting straight on the white, but you know, it helps build it up a little bit and make it a little bit brighter. Yeah, here I am going back over that. So you'll see, and go over it as many times as you need to get satisfied with your pink color. But you know, 2-3 times, that'll really help. So don't make your layers real thick, you know, in that case. You can start with this thin layer, then build up from there. So now I'm moving on to a little flower at the chin of this skeleton. Same kind of flower that was in the eyes, just a little bit smaller. And as you can tell, when this pink is on the white surface, it comes out a lot more bubblegum bright pink. When it's on the black spray paint, it looks a little darker. I personally like the difference that the two pinks look, and you'll see here in a bit I'll actually mix some black into the pink to get those multi-colors there, but it's up to you how pink you want it to be. Yeah, I want it a little more pink. So I'm going back over it. And then after that, I'm going to do some pink flowers on the forehead next to this big blue flower. So I'm making them a little smaller. They're rounded petals, and you know, the petals aren't all symmetrical. I'm making them a little uneven just to get some variation. So I'm using a light touch. This is the larger paintbrush. I'm using a light touch to kind of outline the petal, and then I go back in with the side of the brush to actually fill it in. So you have a palette in your project pack. If you wanted to move the paint from the ramekins, put it on the palette for easier access, you can do that. I just kind of left them in there because we weren't doing any paint mixing. And we're not doing it, frankly, just yet either. I'm going back and doing some pink flowers on the exterior side of the skull first, but eventually we are going to mix some black into the pink to make a darker pink. So up to you whether you use the palette or not, but it's there for you if you need it. So as you can tell, I'm just going in and filling in some fun flowers on the outside of the skull. Again, it's on the black spray paint, so even though I'm using the pink color, it comes out looking a little bit darker. And so I'm just kind of, you know, I put one small flower on that right-hand side, a bigger flower over here, and I'm just kind of figuring out what looks the best. So you can copy me exactly, or you can kind of do your own layout. But either way, some flowers around the outside of the skull will definitely make it look fun and not so scary. Scary's fine though. If you want scary, I suggest not doing the flowers on the outside. That was the first one I did, and it looks creepy. It certainly does. It's a good creepy skull. All right, so at this point, I'm going to mix just the tiniest, guys, the tiniest little dab of black. Black goes a very long way. You do not need much of it. If you put too much black down, you don't need it. So I just dipped the very tip of my paintbrush in the black, put it in that pink splotch that I had there, and now look, it's a darker pink, almost a purple, really, and it looks similar to the pink that's on the black spray paint, the pink that's on the flowers in the eyes and on the flowers on the exterior. And so now I'm coming back over and I'm just doing a little dot over each tooth. Now remember, for the dots, the best way to do it is to get a decent amount of paint on your paintbrush. You want a little bit of water, and then you literally just dip the end of your paintbrush on the surface and it leaves a dot. You don't want to put too much pressure down, or else you get more of a, I don't know, a splosh than a dot. Technical terms. And then I'm going back and I'm doing some fun, I'm going to call it purple details. So I'm doing some lines over that big flower in the center. Again, not too much pressure on that. I'm giving some shading to those flowers on the side. And then I'm coming back in with the small brush. I'm getting the pink, not the dark pink or the purpley pink, but I'm getting the true pink, and I'm putting dots on the blue petals around the eye sockets. And then I'm going to do that bright pink on top of the blue flowers as well. I'm just doing dots on these. You can shake it up and do some fun lines. I mean, however you really decorate flowers, you know, you can do some shading at the tips. You can put a dot in the center, a couple dots, you know, a little cluster of dots in the center, some lines on the petals, all sorts of different options. And then now I'm getting the small brush again. I cleaned it, and then I'm going to get the blue, and I'm going to do the same kind of details, but on the pink flowers. So yeah, dots in the center, some lines on the petals on this one. On the first go round, I did a dot in the center of these flowers, and it just looked a little too much like eyeballs staring at you. So on this go round, I did lines down the center, but you can do a dot. It does look cool. I didn't want that on this one. All right, and then now we did do black before, just for the teeth to get the placement, because we were kind of doing some decoration around the teeth and I wanted to know where they would be. But now that we have finished all of the lighter colors and all of the flowers, I'm going to use black, and I'm going to come in and do some fun decorative swirls and dots to kind of complete the look of the skull. And I promise you, every time I've done this, these end up a little different. So if you're feeling it, I say go for it. This is your dish towel with your skull on it. So you decorate it however you want to. But I kind of, you know, depending on how big the flowers get and where they end up and all of that, my swirls end up different directions. I do more or less of them, however it is. But this is a good guide for you. And if you want to follow this exactly, you do that too. You've got all the options. So yeah, as you could tell, I did some swirls that kind of connected that lower cheekbone into the center. And then now I'm doing some swirls at the very bottom chin next to that flower. And then I come back to the cheek, do a swirl here, a swirl there. I try and mirror it, but frankly, it's never going to be perfect, so it's okay if it's a little off. Mine are off and they look good. Yours can be off, they'll look fine. It's very hard to get it perfectly symmetrical. So then I connect the line that's kind of on the upper part of the skull, and I do a swirl there too. So those two lines, I do try and connect to those and make it look a little more cohesive. Not the worst thing if you don't, but you know, it's just indicating a real sharp cheekbone, so it's nice to kind of make that part of the design. And one good thing to know about getting these kind of fluid looking lines is that you do want a decent amount of water. Not a ton, because that'll make you get, you know, splotches all over the place. But you want your bristle to be moist, and so you'll see I'm dipping it fairly regularly, then mixing it in the paint, making sure it's not too wet, but at the same time decently wet. And then I can have a good clean line when I do that. Otherwise it'll be really dry and you know you'll run out of paint by the time you get to the end. So now I'm coming in here and doing that eyebrow we talked about. So I'm doing a kind of bigger dot in the center, and then I'm hoping to make my dots a little bit smaller as I get to the outside. And then again, I'm trying to mirror it, but let's face it, it's never going to be perfect. But no matter what, it's going to look awesome, even if it's not perfectly symmetrical. So don't worry about that. So the very final touch is to just do some fun little swirls kind of out on the exterior flower side to kind of, you know, bring that decoration into that area as well. So just swirl here, swirl there. Your layout might look a little different from mine, so wherever it looks like it would be good to have a little bit of that decor, go for it. And you can do more than I do. You can just skip this part. It's up to you.